Hello and welcome to Reinventing Nerds. Today we've got a guest from Austin, Texas. His name is Meetesh Karia, and he is the CTO of The Zebra. The Zebra company produces, you would call it an insurance search engine, kind of like the kayak for insurance, right? And Meetesh has been interested in technology pretty much his whole life, and he has a great story to tell. So I'm going to get right in. Welcome, Tesh. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on the call, Joanie.
Oh, great. So you were telling me some really interesting things about how you got to be where you're at now at the Zebra and as a CTO and your tech background. Tell our listeners a little bit about you.
Sure. So I have actually been interested in technology since I want to say the early 80s when I had a TRS-80 with a cassette tape drive. And I was fascinated by it and by the games, and I started learning how to program and save my programs to the cassette tape drive. And then, my dad was an electrical engineer and happened to bring home, what at the time was a workstation for him, like a, massive computer, which was just an 8086. And
Yeah.
so, it ran this thing called the GEM operating system or GEMS operating system. And so I started just digging in. I taught myself assembly. I taught myself BASIC. I taught myself Pascal. I started dialing up the bulletin board systems and learning the ins and outs, and eventually got interested in building computers, running Linux, and got to the point where I actually built a neural network. I wrote a neural network.
Whoa, a neural network?
In high school. Yeah, in high school to try to predict weather patterns. And
Wow.
so I got to play around with, running it on a Cray, rewriting it in Fortran for this massively parallel connection machine. And so I had a lot of, I've been interested in computers for a very long time. And then, ended up studying computer science and math and, minoring in psychology in college and have, pretty much always known that I was going to be in technology.
Interesting.
And yeah, so that was me. And then, I guess probably apropos to what we, I want to discuss today. I grew up first generation, born from immigrants from India, and grew up speaking two languages at home, learning about Indian culture as well as American culture, and then blending the two and using my experiences from everything I learned from all the different cultures to drive me forward, and that to see how that that those different points of view and different experiences really helped me. And I think that being the case, as well as growing up first generation, and that really helped me understand and value what diverse teams and diversities and different viewpoints brought to the table. And it really got me interested in both building and growing and managing diverse teams.
Interesting. Well, it seems like here at the Zebra, you've really been leading the charges to diversify your teams. And I'll just give a little quick shout out here to 7 CTOs as well, because that's how I met you when you were talking at one of their conferences recently about this topic of how to diversify your teams. And why don't you tell our listeners, first of all, why does diversity help and how?
Yeah, absolutely. And, that's a good question, because there's a lot of people that, especially nowadays, is like, okay, we have to have a diverse team, but we don't always talk about why and what that helps. And so I'll share an anecdote that is just, one part of this from when we were early days at the Zebra, and myself and our, one of our co-founders, Josh, were designing what would be our first release, our alpha or our beta. And we were whiteboarding and we were designing the thing that we thought that we would want to use. And we, built that, released it. And then what we learned through that is that 40% of drivers in Texas drive uninsured, and that there are a significant number of them that pay their insurance on prepaid debit cards because they pay enough to get legal and get their registration, and then they let it lapse. And it's because they're deciding on, do I pay this or do I pay my utility bill or my phone bill? And while I didn't come from, significant means, I thankfully was lucky enough to never have to worry about, are we legal or do we have lights? Right. But that different perspective was something that never even occurred to either of us,
Mm-hmm.
because we had not lived it, right? And so that's one little example of how and why diversity in terms of experiences, viewpoints, age, experience, everything is critical to actually building a better company and team.
Yeah, so especially in tech development is what I'm hearing, that experience of understanding who your potential customers are, who your base is. Yeah.
Right, and being able to empathize and understand consumers, being able to evaluate and view different points of view, and
Mm-hmm.
and understand is critically important.
Yeah. Well, I hear a lot of people thinking about diversity and kind of coming up with excuses. Why not? Because usually it's like, well, it's hard to find the qualified candidates out there. We just don't have enough in our pool of people that we're looking for, especially in technology. You need really highly qualified people. So I know you faced that at the Zebra. And what kind of strategies or methods have you used to attract diverse candidates, like to hire qualified people?
Sure, and I'll start and say actually it is challenging, but it's absolutely doable, and I'll challenge people to do it because
Mm,
it's worth it. And one of the reasons it's challenging is that in general, and this is my view, we as humans want to be around people that are like us.
yes.
And that goes to recruiting as well, which is we tend to, subjectively prefer people who are like us. People applying tend to look at those companies, and the group of people at those companies don't represent them, then they're not as interested, right? So it is a challenge, and it does require being extremely intentional about it. It doesn't happen by accident. And so what are, some of the things that we started to do is, it actually started way back when we had an engineering team of 4 people. And, it was all male, but thankfully we had people of different backgrounds, right, that we were able to attract. And, this is about the point where I started thinking, if I'm not able to find a woman and, and start the process of building a gender diverse team, it's going to become more and more daunting for a woman to come in to a larger team full of men, right?
Right.
And so around that time, I was looking for help in terms of management of the team, and I sought to hire a project manager. And I thought to myself that, okay, this is an opportunity for me to remove the requirement to be technical, to widen the top of the funnel, and focus on bringing in a qualified woman to the team. That hands down has been the best hire I've made in my entire career. She went on from being our project manager to then our director of engineering. And just recently I promoted her to be our VP of engineering.
No kidding. So how did she end up in such a technical role, or is it not really that technical?
Oh, it is, but she picked up enough along the way. And she's just a phenomenal leader and a people leader, a motivator, as well as she learned enough on the technology side to be able to understand when to call BS, when to go bring in help, and she's not going to architect a system, but I didn't need that. I'm the CTO. I have, people with strong software engineering background. I need someone as a VP of engineering that can drive delivery, that can manage the team, that can grow the team. And she's been phenomenal at that. And so, that not only did it help start the growth in terms of building a diverse team, but it also ended up becoming, probably my most critical hire.
Yeah. Well, I loved what you said about opening up the funnel or widening the funnel. And, is that something that you've used in other hiring decisions as well?
It is. And, another thing we did is we said specifically for the majority of our roles, actually, I don't think we've ever made it mandatory to have a college degree.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And that's on our website, all the roles. I think we list a must-have and then, nice to have, or would be, additional in process. And in the must-have, we never put a college degree in there because, there are some roles that we're hiring for where, yes, a background or experience in computer science is what we're looking for. But then to balance that, we went out and said, hey, let's go to some of the, non-traditional education sources. Let's go to some of the boot camps. Let's go to Africa, and let's go and build a team. And then we'll balance that with some of the experience that, the more traditional search for technology talent that people, go for. And we'll balance that and then grow some of the younger talent, but we don't have to stick with just college hires in CS, right? We can go and that's going to be a place, and that was a place where we were able to find more women, more people of color, et cetera.
Okay, so let's get into a little bit of detail here. So you widen the funnel, you find people from non-traditional sources, but yet you also find that they're qualified. How do you, sort of do that kind of screening to make sure that they can do what you need them to do?
Sure. Honestly, a lot of it at that point really comes down to hunger, right? And when you're looking for someone, and this comes, with college too, which is you're looking for someone who you believe can be on the right trajectory and learn and grow. Someone who has a desire to learn, someone who wants to take ownership and has shown problem solving and analytical skills. Right now with computer science, sure, they have some learnings or theory that they've brought on and understanding, but they're not going to have the experience. In fact, sometimes that can, speaking from my own personal experience, that can get a little bit in the way, where I certainly was probably, right out of college, a little bit more, cocky or overconfident in my own, lack of experience and lack of need for experience.
Right, because the real world's a lot different than a classroom. Yeah.
Right. But so a lot of it is about looking at why they switched, right? What, what drives them? Are they able to solve problems? Do they want to solve problems? Did they learn to code, or did they learn to solve problems really?
Okay.
And so that's what we look for. That's the thing that we try to seek out in the interview, because you can teach anyone a language.
Yeah.
Right. You can teach people to code. That's a way to express solving those problems, but understanding, that underlying ability to get a machine or someone to solve a problem is actually truly what it's all about.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. So you're talking about it's not just how many languages you can code in and your proficiency there. It's how well do you solve problems, which is really what the underlying issue is when you are using the language. Yeah.
Right.
Huh. Well, what kinds of, I don't know, maybe unexpected themes came out of this, when you started widening this funnel and getting people without the traditional backgrounds? What came up that was sort of better and worse, on both sides?
Sure. So, on the better side, honestly, that there was a lot more empathy, right? You would think that we would have, and we did have a little bit of where people are like, okay, they don't understand how to solve these different things, but then you see the effort and what goes into changing a career or, being that person where you may have imposter syndrome anyway. And then it's magnified by the fact that you're someone who's, a female or a person of color, and then came from a non-traditional background.
Mm-hmm.
But what that did is it really helped tamper the sense of entitlement that, I think is kind of growing in technology, especially where, salaries are rising. Everyone's in demand. That sense of entitlement is growing, but it's refreshing to see the opposite, where, there are people without those opportunities and looking for their first opportunities, and to see that be completely squashed and that perspective brought to the team. So we were able to see that collaboration, see egos come down. And then the other thing that helped drive was because, these people didn't come up in a computer science or engineering or tech culture and background, we actually had to go formalize some of the stuff around a career ladder and growth, earlier, which was a good thing, because we had to be able to communicate and paint that picture and explain what comes next and how they grow in their careers. Whereas, had we not had those people from those different backgrounds, we may have waited on that stuff. And I would argue that would have been a bad thing to wait too long on that.
Right. Yeah.
On the flip side that you asked, so what are some of the, things that we did end up erring on the side of we had rather than having over-engineered software, there have been times where we've actually had under-engineered software. Okay. Now, in a startup, I still would argue that, while you want to strive to find that balance, it's better to be slightly under-engineered than over-engineered, because it's all about finding the business model, iterating, keeping pace, but then that can compound, right? And so as we've now grown and we've been able to kind of balance the team, we raised our last round in September of 2017, and that allowed us to grow the team and go and fill specific holes. And so we can skew more computer science and technical for our infrastructure and platform team, right? Whereas the product teams don't need to skew that way. And so, but those teams can then go focus on shoring up some of the underlying aspects that, perhaps were just ignored or not, that we didn't pay attention to. Right. Because we were, the people doing the work didn't have the experience or background to do that.
So this is something that perhaps was a liability a little bit under-engineered, you said, as the airing, but yet you had the sort of diverse approach and the creativity and all of that for people to solve this. Mm-hmm. Interesting. And to kind of look for new solutions that people who are all more homogeneous might not have been able to see as easily.
Right. And, honestly, a lot of those people were, because it was under-engineered, or like the reason some of it was under-engineered is a lot of those people were more geared towards just getting something done versus getting something perfect. Right. In terms of
which is very nerd-like.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, and it's because they came to it from a different background, and they learned about how to go get things done as opposed to the perfect way to do certain things.
Mm-hmm. So does that make them faster at getting things out?
Sometimes, sometimes it depends, like just like with anyone, right out of college or whatever, sometimes they're slower just because they don't know the right solution to go take in the first case. So they have to try a bunch of different things.
Okay.
And, one of the benefits of experience is that you can look at a problem and immediately narrow down and say, okay, I need to go do this, or I need to do one of these two things. So yes, in some cases they're faster. They're certainly faster to just like, let's just go.
Right. And one of the things I'm hearing too is they're a little bit, more able to take some risks and try things out. One of the things that I hear so often about younger people coming into the workplace today is the being risk averse, because the whole perfectionist, people are so used to getting A's in school and, looking so amazing on social media and being perfect that they're not willing to take the risks as much. But you've got people who have clearly already taken risks to change careers and do things professionally. So they're out there trying, and they're going to keep going until they find a solution.
Absolutely. And so yeah, one of the things I was extremely proud of is that, when I think when I met you at that conference, at that point, half of our team, or a little bit over half of our team, was non-traditionally educated. And by that, I mean a non-STEM degree. Now, some of those people had been in the field for a long time. Some of them had been in that field for a short time, but it was refreshing that we had those different perspectives and that different sense of opportunity and entitlement and growth and different career paths to contribute to what it takes to actually build a company.
You've mentioned entitlement a couple times now, and this comes up a lot on my podcast. People, this techno entitlement kind of factor. How does that arise, and what are some ideas that you have here in terms of reducing it with your diverse approach?
Yeah, it is something that is coming up, and it is a generalization, right? And it's not everyone for sure, but if you look at it in a situation where the supply of good engineering talent is far lower than the demand for engineering talent, it's kind of like the people in the driver's seat are the engineers.
Right.
So salaries are going up, which is basically putting putting engineers in this position of, you need me. Yep. I don't need you. Right. And so what are you going to do for me? Right. You can go back to the famous, JFK quote, ask not what the country can do for you, what you can do for your country. Right. Like it's this kind of, backwards dynamic because of just the market economics right now. And so that, naturally in some ways leads to some of that entitlement. and that is really where, we've seen that balancing a team with people who are looking for the opportunity. Also, they have the talent, they have the capability, but perhaps not the access to the ability to show it. For example, we started working with a company called Andela back in the summer of 2016, and Andela, their overall vision is that brilliance is evenly distributed, but the opportunity isn't. And so they, have been working to kind of provide that opportunity to a lot of great talent on the African continent.
Right.
And so, we started working with them and now have 14 engineers in Africa that have been a phenomenal addition to our team. They've brought this energy, this passion, this drive to the team, and again, more perspective, because they didn't have the opportunity. And these are extremely talented people that I would love to have on the team here as well. And they've allowed us to really kind of inspire the rest of the team. They come out to the US, once a year if I'm out here, and they don't just, work within the engineering team, but they inspire the entire company.
Nice. Well, this brings up another issue. You're talking about non-traditional sources. I mean, Africa is pretty far away from Austin, and you say they still work there, so you're dealing with them remotely. I mean, how does that come up for you? And what kind of changes have you had to make to manage remote teams?
We had started with some teams or a few engineers in India and some in Ukraine at various times. So we'd always had a little aspect of that, but it's really one, it's helped that Africa, and the bulk of our team there is in Lagos, Nigeria, which is actually in line with kind of Western Europe time zone.
Oh, so that's convenient.
Yeah, which is, so while they're shifted and they're remote, it's not as difficult from a time zone perspective as Asia is. So that's helped, but it's also really helped us embrace things like video chat, and we use it for everything. And what that meant was that once we started getting more and more remote employees within the US, we were already set up for that. We've also done things where we've tried to put everyone on the same, on an even playing field, where we've said, hey, for this meeting, even the people in the Austin office, everybody join from their own laptops or their own computers with headsets. And that way, rather there being one conference room and a couple people remote, everyone's on an even playing field. So we've done things like that. It's allowed us to then have, people and we have an engineer who started working with us in Austin, wanted to move for personal reasons. And, he was able to continue working with us because we were already set up from a process standpoint, from a company standpoint, from a technology standpoint, to support that.
Yeah.
And so it's helped us actually now build or grow teams in different ways as well.
What challenges have come up though? I mean, these are all great things, but like what else has happened that might have been harder to deal with?
Yeah, and I mean, and part of that is pretty common with any kind of remote team, is that there's an extra communication overhead. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it requires more things to be written down. There is a little bit more back and forth. It does require more written communication at times, which, sometimes people prefer in person. So there is a little bit of this back and forth sometimes where, with the time zone, you can end up saying, okay, I can't get this done right now. I can do it later, or someone's asleep versus someone's awake. But, I would say that the benefits have outweighed those challenges and continue to. But yeah, the coordination and the communication definitely is slightly more work than it would be if someone was face-to-face in the office.
Does that mean just in terms of like sort of having to over communicate or mitigate conflict that might come up, or miscommunications, or what?
No, I think it's more around communicating context around things, and people not being around to just there's a lot of conversations that when you're in one office tend to just happen organically, or people find someone in the break room and they just start having an impromptu conversation. That doesn't happen with remote teams.
Right.
So everything has to be more explicit, intentional. So that stuff has to, the entire context and background often has to be communicated more explicitly.
Do you see each other face to face at all?
We do. And so the entire team, we bring out half the team in the spring, the other half of the team in the fall for 2 to 3 weeks. And then we started sending a group of 4 to 5 people from Austin to Africa every summer. And so we have 3 different touch points. And I'm a big believer for remote teams that in the value of periodic face-to-face communication.
Why is that?
Just because you actually get to empathize with them. You get to learn about the person and who they are and how they work. You know, when we go there, I've been out there twice. I get to meet their families. I get to meet, you know, for the ones that have kids, I get to see the way they work and their friends and how they interact. And there's something like they're a person. They're not just a face on the other side of a computer or a voice, right? And that helps it helps people treat them as part of the team and not get into this out of sight, out of mind, or they're just someone, you know, someone somewhere else. They're truly become part of the team, just physically sitting somewhere else.
Yeah, that is so critical. I mean, again, though, when I do a lot of work with virtual teams and remote work, and like we're talking about with hiring diverse people, you know, it's like when you're having that face-to-face time, people give the excuse of, oh, it costs too much. You know, how do you get around that? Where do you see the cost benefit of all that?
The cost benefit, I would say, you know, honestly, if you look at it, what's the risk of, especially nowadays, hiring only in Austin? When, you know, Google's moving here, Facebook's moving here, you know, Apple's building a massive campus, Oracle's got a massive campus, and, you know, thankfully Amazon didn't decide to put a, you know, HQ2 here. But I would actually look at it different as like, what's the cost of not diversifying, of not, you know, looking for other ways to grow your team? Because what happens when, you know, Indeed, which I love and is a local employer, but they're hiring a lot of people,
right?
And they have the means to go pay more than we do, right? And we want to be competitive. We want to have definitely want to compensate people really well and you know, fairly and give them the experience. But there's no way we can compete with a company like Indeed when it comes to just compensation. Not yet. Hopefully, we'll be in that
someday. Yeah.
And so I actually kind of look at it the opposite way of like, what's the cost of not doing it?
Interesting. So a part of that is just getting the good talent, getting the best of the best, but all over the world.
Right.
It's a really small price to fly people around a little bit and house them in different locations to build those relationships and that communication. Yeah.
Right. And one of the other smart things that Andela did early on is that cost was part of the monthly, salary that we would pay. And so it was amortized out across 12 months. So rather than there being from a purely logistic and budgeting standpoint, rather than there being one lump sum payment or line item on the budget that could easily be slashed if necessary, it was spread out over time.
That makes a lot of sense.
Which also in a lot of ways reflects the value in it, right? Because it pays off over time too. And it really, if you look at it on a monthly basis, isn't that much.
Yeah. I mean, wow, that's really smart. Giving them high praise there. And you've internalized that too at the Zebra, not just with Andela, right?
Right, exactly. Which is that, so this trip that we've taken out there, we tried it and it was, is valuable enough that it's now part of our annual budget.
Yep.
And it's just there. We've shown the value. It's been able to kind of grow our teams, and we've been able to execute because of it. Wow,
that is actually just so impressive that you really have these numbers to prove it, and also just the feeling there that you've experienced it. I want to ask you one final question before we have to sign off, because we've used up so much of our time. But you've talked also about growing your team so much, and you also started out with a team of 3, right? And then you said you had to hire that 4th. And how many people do you have now?
I have roughly 60 people on my team.
Oh, okay. So that's a big difference. So
it is.
Let's wrap this up by going back to you personally. How have you grown, or what kind of things have you had to do to suddenly be able to manage a team of 60?
Sure. Well, I mean, I'll say, from a nerd standpoint, I'm solving different problems now, right? I haven't coded for years,
Hmm.
but, and people often ask me, do I miss it? And I think about it, I was like, occasionally little bits, but I'm still solving problems. I'm just solving very different problems. I'm solving business problems. I'm solving product problems. I'm solving organizational problems. I'm solving communication problems, technology problems, but on a broader scale, right? And so I've had to, to grow and learn over time to, of how I'm going to communicate through vision and through direction. Um, and, especially at this level, how I have my entire job is really about communication in different ways, different shapes, different forms, oftentimes communicating the same thing over and over again, but to different groups of people. Um, and that even though I have the authority of a title, my leadership is a lot through influence. Um, and, as opposed to by telling people you have to do it this way. Right. And so I, built up a team of great leaders and managers, and then have to, give them the room to both have their ownership and fail, but not fail spectacularly, and then give them the ability to learn from those, mistakes, but then still make sure we're moving forward as a company too. So it's been a great, great growth path. I've loved it. It's a different challenge, and but one that I love after 20 years of being more on the coding technology side. It's nice to be solving different problems.
Wow, you say it so much better than I do. I mean, people always ask me how I went from engineering to psychology, and I'm like,
Mhm.
exactly what you said. I'm still solving problems, but they're people problems, people issues, then rather than technical ones. And
Mhm.
yeah, and I love the way you say that it was a nice opportunity for you to just sort of grow and do something different. So you have a
Mhm.
constantly changing landscape,
Right.
doing the same problems over and over again. So that was really interesting.
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by people and
Yeah,
what makes them tick. I minored in psychology,
yeah.
and as a leader, I find I take a lot of inspiration from sports leaders and their use of psychology and sports psychology in terms of building teams. And so that part really interests me, and so I love it.
Yeah, that's really fascinating to have a psych minor too. I have to think about that for other engineers. I mean, I
Yeah.
teach some college students and have them think about that, how they can combine the two, because it can just come up in so many different ways. Well, I don't want to go down that path right now because we've come to the end of our time, but your story is really interesting, bringing in the diverse teams, how to manage these groups to be better collaborators, to work across the world, and grow yourself in the process from technical, problems to people ones. I mean, I think you're a real inspiration to our listeners and our viewers. So thank you, Tesh.
Well, thank you very much. I hope I can continue to do it because it's the job is never done, and so I certainly welcome any ideas our listeners have too.
Well, how can they get in touch with you? Speaking of.
Absolutely. So I'm on Twitter, Tesh11, TESH11, and I'm on LinkedIn as well, also under Tesh11.
Excellent. That's so easy. So we'll also have that in our show notes. And I love that you're interested in hearing from other people and just continuing the dialogue here. So thanks again, Tesh, for being on Reinventing Nerds.
Thanks for having me.
Well, and thanks to all our listeners. We're here at reinventingnerds.com. So please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review, and we'll see you next time.